Okay, so right now, David, Caleb pretty much don't even know what this video is about. I'm kind of like throwing this on them. This might not even get posted, but I feel like it's a good conversation. The other day, me and Jamila, this is Jamila, we were watching A Different World. For those of y'all who are probably less pigmented, not really familiar with the show, it's kind of like a spinoff of the Cosby Show where Denise went to college, and one of the characters in there, his name is Dwayne Wayne. He said something along the lines of, "We need more black professors." And that kind of like sprung the thought in me where I was pretty much like, dang, you know what? Do we really still need black professors? Because that show's like what, like 20 years ago? Maybe even less.
Like, let me think. Yeah, like 30 years ago.
30. Yeah, sheesh. Yeah, so the show was like kind of like 30. It's like pretty old. So I was like thinking to myself, like, yeah, for sure. Back then they needed more black professors. They needed, and I started to think more of like, okay, what more black do we need today? Like, do I myself need to be like a black professor? Like, or me being black, like, what space should I occupy? I'm in the type community, so like I'm all about like life coaching and personality typology and everything. Like, there's not really many black people there. I make a joke all the time, like, or we need more black type influencers, which is pretty much like MBTI. So I was like, is that really enough? Is that like bringing a change? I ended up thinking along those lines, and I was like, you know what? I feel like we do have, at least today, a lot of black people, a lot of black professors, a lot of black artists, a lot of black this, a lot of black that. And it's not necessarily that we might need more of them, but rather they do not take up enough spaces because they all congregate in certain spaces. We probably have mad black professors right now, but then they're all at the HBCUs. That's why we don't really have many black professors maybe over at Liberty University or other spots like that. Jamila ended up saying that black people don't really occupy enough spaces. And I said, yeah. So I said, it's because they congregate. And she said, well, why do we have to do that? She then asked me, what am I passionate about? And I said, well, I'm passionate about pretty much understanding each other and not giving more reason for already unreasonable white people. And I only say this because the black people are like older brothers. So pretty much like what I mean by that is that I feel as if when Jamila asked me, like, what am I passionate about? Because I was saying, like, am I enough? Like, if Dwayne Wayne is like, yeah, he's striving so he could be a black professor in this world where there's not enough black people like represented as professors or whatever. I started to think like, okay, me being black, like, what do I need to do? And so that's why she asked me, like, what am I passionate about? And I said, like, okay, I want to help people understand each other, but also with both sides. Like, and I think that it's better to address black people because, again, no offense, but it seems like it's kind of like speaking to like an older brother and a younger brother. So if you have like an older brother who like is like and a younger brother, they're fighting over like a toy. You're gonna speak to the older brother to like be the bigger person, the more mature one, because at the end of the day, the younger brother is just gonna be unreasonable. It's just gonna be like irrational. I feel like a lot of times is not to say that black people are better than white people. I'm gonna repeat, it's not to say that black people are better than white people, but it's already been very clear that white people do not need reason. A lot of times it's just irrational. They do not need reason to have slavery. They do not need reason to shoot black people. So the best thing that we can do is, even though it sucks, we need to behave. We need to be the older brother. We need to set an example. Dwayne Wayne, he said another thing on there. He said it's not enough to be equal. We got to be better, which means that we have to try harder. We have to try harder. Like even if like we can't get away with stuff that white people do. Like, we have to do better. Like, if a white cop comes to your car because you were speeding or whatever, you have to do extra. You have to like hold your hands on the steering wheel. You have to make sure that you're saying yes sir, yes ma'am, like whatever it might be, because they are going to look for any reason to shoot. They are going to look, and that's the world that we have to live in. So if I were to become more of a quote unquote black influencer, pretty much like the thing that I realized is that black people probably would not like me. And maybe that's why a majority of my followers are white. It's not to say that, oh, I'm on the camp that like, well, maybe if you didn't sag your pants, maybe if you didn't do this, maybe if you didn't do that, maybe if you didn't resist, then you wouldn't have got shot. It's not necessarily that, but because a reason's already being looked for to shoot you, then we should not give any more reason to that. So that was essentially like what I was saying, like whereas like so I said black people probably would not really like me, and that's maybe why majority of my followers are white, which goes back to black people being unable to truly infiltrate culture. Because when we really do try to infiltrate culture, when we do try to occupy spaces, it's either one of two things might happen. We are like the one black person and like a lot of like white people around us, and the white people view us as one of them in a way, so then we can't really like influence really much like what's going on over there. We can't really like culture change, or we congregate and we create our own culture, and then we kind of like do what already like most white people are doing, and then it's kind of like a us versus them mentality that we have. So bringing that all around, because that was just the foundation, that was just the context. Caleb, you are a doctor. David, you are an artist. Jamila is even an artist. I was wondering, in like all four of us, like we're black. I said a lot, so anything that you could like bring up on that topic, like whether you disagree, whether you agree. I just wanted to know, like, I guess first and foremost, like, have y'all ever ran into that kind of problem?
All right, hold up.
Yeah.
Okay. David, you want to go first? You want to go first?
I'll tackle this one.
All right.
I have a lot of issues with what Denzel said.
Yeah, I have a lot to say too. So
There we go.
One thing I will say though, before we get started, I'm also an artist.
Yes,
Period.
that is true. That is true.
Tell him.
That is true. You're a doctor,
Tell him.
artist. You're
What's-
right.
Remind these niggas.
Is it C money?
It's big C.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Put some
All right.
All right, go ahead, David.
But he do got money though. He sees money.
That's true. Big C money. I have a lot of issue with framing it as black people need to behave. And I'm sure you didn't necessarily mean it that way.
Right.
However, that's seriously problematic.
Yes.
Because this is often a talking point of a lot of people, which they call respectability politics.
Yes.
Which you behave like a good black person, not only for the aesthetic of like looking like a well-behaved citizen, but also for the sake of survival. In which case, it shouldn't even have to be that way because we are not the perpetrators of such behavior, right? Like we shouldn't be in the position to have to survive or to have to look good just so that we can keep on living. We should be able to keep on living just for the sake of the fact that we have human dignity. So then we are not the issue. It's really the people who are trying to put us in the position of making us look like we are in a position of survival.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't agree with black people behaving all the time because most often in history, it's the rebellion and the allyship in that rebellion that has caused change. It hasn't necessarily been people going along with the status quo. It has always been the rebellion against that for the sake of human dignity. Now, should we do that in peaceful manners? Should we do that in more financial manners? That's what I would say. Because what it always comes down to is the money. What it always comes down to is the profit. If we want to be able to create change, most likely we have to hit the pockets because that's what people understand most of all. I don't even think it's violence. I don't think it's a matter of peace or anything like that. It's a matter of, okay, how much profit can I gain or lose in any given situation? I think that's what changes people's minds. Now, in terms of being able to, like, whether or not we should have more or less people, more or less black people in certain areas, I do think we need more. The reason why I say that is specifically because, yes, you have black people who try to infiltrate, but the issue is they don't even have a lot of resources there because they're underrepresented. They don't have access to certain things because there's not a lot of people like them who think like them who can then be able to lend a hand. If you're the only person who looks like you in a certain area, you're not going to be able to get a lot of certain things because people don't understand what you need and why you need it. And if you're the only one advocating for yourself, of course you're not going to get access to those things that you need from people who don't understand you as easily, as opposed to being able to congregate in the area of where people understand you. So that makes sense as to why people would congregate with one another, especially if they feel like, okay, if I try to infiltrate, I'm not going to get as far as I could if we just do this on our own. So I'm not saying either or is better, because there's pros and cons to both. But I do think that regardless, we need more of everything. We need more of people congregating with one another, because then that creates more of a stake. It creates more opportunities for one another, and then we can lift each other up. But then we also need people who can infiltrate, which is also very difficult. But then that's why we need more people who can infiltrate, because then they can still work together to be able to grant each other access and resources within those infiltrated spaces. And then we can be able to collaborate with other allies who actually do begin to understand and who actually do want to be able to help us out. So I don't think it's a matter of either or. It's just a matter of more, if that makes sense.
Makes total sense. I want Caleb to speak too.
I agree with everything David said, 100%. I think the key word was understand. People want to be in spaces where they're understood. A lot of what goes on, not necessarily racism, but just in general, profiling and everything, is a failure for white people to understand Black people for who they really are, right? So understanding that just because of the way we may talk, or the way we may dress, or like, you know, what music we're playing, that doesn't automatically make us a thug or a menace to society, right? So I think that kind of addresses the reason why you'll just see more Black professors, for example, in a space with more Black people. Like for me, I went to an HBCU my first year, right? And of course, there was definitely more like Black professors, because they want to be around Black students where they know they're going to have an influence. A lot of that character and a lot of that purpose is gone as soon as you're a Black professor at a PWI, because you're not even administering that knowledge to the same, you know, demographic that you want to be, you know, administering to. So now you have this situation where you have this Black professor, let's say, in a white institution, surrounded by white colleagues, and you basically get stripped of that Blackness that you have, because you need to be a professor just like them, and you need to teach your students about whatever the curriculum says, without being able to instill, you know, the other things that us as Black people need to know, the street smarts, the behaving, if you will, right? So it's not necessarily about, you know, Black people needing to act better. It's always been about white people needing to be better. I don't think there's much more we can do except for the self-destruction and the self-loathing that we can, you know, try to get rid of within our own community. But again, that was all imparted on by white people and the imperialism, and throwing us in ghettos and making us fight for ourselves and keeping us in food deserts. So all of that stems from the behavior and like the actions of the past couple centuries, right? So I feel like to put it back in Black people's hands and say, we need to do this, we need to do that, when in reality, it was never our situation to fix in the first place, right? We've been put into this broken system, and it's been broken for centuries. And then we've been handed like a wooden wrench, and we're like, here, you know, put this car together, you know, with no tools. And it's hard, because like, you know, where are we supposed to start, right? We try to start within our own community, but there's already division here. There's already people, once you spend enough time around, you know, white people as a Black person, you start to resent other Black people, right? I know a lot of kids, even like first generations like us, if you were ever bullied in school, you were never bullied by white kids. You were bullied by other Black kids, right? So the division already started within our community. And we feel like the only thing that Black people are responsible for is addressing that. As far as everything that has to do with white people and the way they act towards us, people in positions of power, everything like that, that's all on them. And the only thing we can do here is put ourselves in a position to where we can reap the benefits once they finally make those changes. And then do our best to educate the youth and put ourselves in positions of power to where we don't have to depend on white people to make changes, because now we're in positions to make the changes as well. And that doesn't begin until, like you said, like David said, we have more, right? We have to be around people that understand us, and people have to be able to understand us for them to help us implement that change. And right now, there's too much of a cultural divide to put enough Black people in a white space, well, to put like 1 or 2 Black people in a white space and expect there to be change. So again, there has to be more.
You have anything to add?
Mm-mm.
Last thing about behaving,
Mm.
it's not rewarded most often.
Mm.
Like even when you do behave, for example, prime example is Martin Luther King. He was peacefully protesting. He was behaving in the while still being able to like rebel against what he thought was improper, and the whole time he was hated on for it. He was mocked. He was persecuted. He was almost assassinated multiple times while he was behaving. And then when he finally started to consider, after years of behaving and trying to be a proper citizen, of trying to be respectable, after years of that, when he had just considered like, okay, maybe we should turn this into a financial issue. Maybe we should stop being as cooperative as we were before and turn our efforts towards the pockets. That's when they killed him. That's when they were like, okay, now he's too powerful. We got to get rid of him.
Like, I don't know, I was thinking about him.
And now, after he's gone, now people are saying, oh, but why can't you be more like Martin Luther King? Because they've pacified his a lot of his movement, his ideas and ideologies, when it was actually a little bit more complex than how they make it seem. They oversimplify it for the sake of making us or trying to manipulate us into behaving like the good old Martin Luther King. And they didn't even like him when he was alive. So then what good would that do us now if we only behave? It has to be more complex than that.
You saying that they didn't like him while he was alive, but wasn't he also seen as, I don't want to say a coon, but he was hanging out in white circles pretty much. Like he was seeing like a lot of the higher up white people, and he was in the meetings with them to the point where even Malcolm X was like, look at this nigga. Like he's just like really like he seemed like a sellout to an extent. But to me, it also seemed like that's how he was able to even gain the power and the influence that he did, because it's so, and that's kind of like where I'm also going with this too. So just so you know, like I'm throwing this out here so that anybody who's watching, like they can really hear like the points. I'm trying to agitate by using certain terminology in that way. So I love the way that y'all are responding in that way. I'm not as ignorant as I made it seem, but I do believe to an extent, like I'm not against rebellion. No, like you said, like even Martin Luther King Jr., like he rebelled and all of that. But when it comes to quote unquote like the behaving, the way that I see it is like a lot of times, if I were to die, right? If I'm gonna get shot by a cop for whatever reason, God forbid, or something like that, I don't want my legacy to be tainted or washed because of something that was like if they watch the body cams or whatever it might be, like I like started like getting agitated or like whatever with the cop, because then automatically this is where the conflict comes. Rather, the way that I see it, and it could be idealistic. If it is, definitely let me know, because what I'm saying is like there's probably other people who see it this way. But the way that I'm thinking is like if I were once again, like God forbid, get shot, whatever, and they check the body cams, and then everybody clearly sees like, dang, no, that man was really compliant. He wasn't even being like whatever. This cop really just shot him for no reason. Nobody can even say, well, he was on drugs, or well, he was like on this. Like he was behaving, he was using manners, he was whatever. Then if we have enough of these cases, I feel like it's just a no-brainer. It's like, no, this is obviously a problem. But I think what happens a lot of times is that because even if obviously these Black people, like they haven't done anything necessarily, the media, they tend to capitalize on just this small thing that he did. Like, well, maybe if he didn't resist arrest, or maybe if he just kept his hands over there, or maybe if he didn't start cussing, maybe if he didn't start doing that. And to me, obviously I'm watching, I'm like, that's not what it was, but clearly that's what the irrational not all white people, whatever, but white people, they're gonna say they're gonna capitalize on that. And so it's like, all right, let's stop giving them a reason to do that. Let's literally make it so obvious that we are not doing anything. Y'all are just the agitators in this way. And once it becomes that obvious that we make it harder for them to even find reason, then it's like, all right, they just have to face the music like, dang, yeah, these last 5 cases, literally, these men, there's nothing to blame it on. There really is a problem here.
Can I say something real quick?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So 2 things with that. One, I don't feel like there's been enough, there's been enough to where niggas know, right? Niggas know, white people know there's a problem, right? And what I've come to realize by niggas literally releasing body cam footage and niggas doing nothing and niggas still getting shot and white people are like, oh, well, nigga was definitely doing something. And I'm like, I think that no matter what happens, there will always be a group of people who is going to be in the white majority that are going to be like, well, he had it coming. He did something wrong. There's no way he just shot him. When there could be clearly footage of a nigga just sitting there, normal traffic stop. Cop is like, let me go get you. I'll go get your wallet. I'll like take out your wallet, get your license and registration. They go open his glove compartment, and then the cop like, oh shit, shoots him. He ain't do nothing, right? There was a case when and I remember the body cam footage because this cop was actually like truly remorseful, but again, still stands, doesn't matter because the nigga died. I don't care how remorseful you are, you're going to bring him back to life, right? And he had headphones in and he was leaving the store. And the cops were yelling at him to turn around. He didn't hear them because he had headphones in, right? So then he turns around and sees cops yelling at him. He reaches in his jacket to pause his iPod and they shoot him. He dies. And it's just like...
Yeah, I think I heard about that.
You tell me, what was that nigga supposed to do differently there to where niggas going to be like, oh man, like if he just did this, he would have still been alive. Like what? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like there's already been enough cases like that to where there's either like inconclusive evidence that someone even did something wrong, or there's evidence there that someone didn't do anything wrong. And even if they did, right?
Yeah.
Not punishable by death, right? Like a nigga selling loose cigarettes is not punishable by death. Mm-hmm. Someone fighting back at a traffic stop isn't punishable by death, right? Someone resisting arrest isn't punishable by death. Someone defending themselves just because they're being attacked, right? Your life is in danger regardless of whether you have a badge or not. Like, I'm supposed to just let you fuck me up. Oh, but now I'm defending myself, so now I'm resisting. Now I deserve to die. You shouldn't have been resisting. Like, you see, like, there's so much, like, gray area in that because it's all subjective. There's all personal opinion from people who are looking for reasons, people who are biased and already looking one way, right? So there doesn't need to be any more death for there to be change or for white people to notice change. They're not going to do it, right? Which is why we have to push the envelope, which is why there has to be rebellion. Because if niggas sit quiet, they die. If niggas comply, they die, right? If niggas don't comply, then they die, but now they have an excuse, And then they can use that one instance of the one nigga not compliant to justify all the other innocent black kids who died, right? So it's like there's nothing on our side that we can do except for push for change in a way where we know we're going to be heard, which is why I really didn't care when niggas were looting and rioting, right? Because now people are paying attention. But the only problem is those same group of people that are always going to find a reason to justify why someone got shot are the same people like, oh, you see all the niggas out there looting and stealing and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, all right, well, at least we got your attention now. So now let's focus on the matter at hand. The problem is there's always going to be a distraction, whether you want there to be or not. And they're always going to use this as an excuse for why people are outraged or this group of people is out of control, why black people are this and black people are that. And there's nothing that we can do in terms of behavior to change them, right? So it gets to a point where like, okay, we're protesting, we're pushing the envelope, we're doing this and that, and we're doing all we can. And then getting black people in positions of power, but then you also have that one person who's a coon, right? And then they're going to be like, oh, well, this black person said this, so all black people should listen to this person. She knows what she's talking about. Let's talk like Candace Owens, for example, like someone like that, right? Where they'll just go online and spew like all this hate and bigotry towards other black people. and white people will eat it up because it's coming from a black person. And that's the person they'll choose to listen to, regardless of the hundreds of other black people who are in positions of power that have like actual views that are helping to push the black envelope and helping to be progressive. Like we had a black president and this shit didn't change. People still found a way to listen to niggas on Fox News. So like we're at a point where it's like, what else are we supposed to do, right? Like that's it. So now like I feel like we don't have to be responsible for white people. We should have never been responsible for white people's behavior.
I agree with that.
Yeah, they should have been. And I feel like I don't want to like throw you under the bus, but I feel like not everything you've been saying, but a lot of what you've been saying has been pushing the responsibilities for black people. And that's not the case.
I agree with you on everything that you said. And I think that, like I said, I was purposely trying to like push in that direction. But to an extent, I do also have these thoughts, and I'm like, what is this here? Like, for example, you talking about, the looters and the rioters and stuff like that. And how there's always going to be that group of people that's just like, well, maybe if they weren't doing this, maybe. And it's like, yeah, I agree with you. And if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying like, no matter what, like there's just always going to be that group of people. But then do you also feel like we are adding to the fire by doing that too? Or because those people will always be there, then just like you said, they're just going to use that one example of, see, this guy was doing this. So now, and there really is just absolutely like nothing that can be done, period.
We can't be responsible for other people changing their thoughts, regardless of what the situation is, regardless of what race you are, what orientation you are. We can't be responsible for other people changing their thought process. And that's all it is. Like, I can't make you believe differently from whatever you believe. You can't make me believe differently. You can try to convince me that some things exist and some things don't. But regardless, if I don't want to change, I'm not going to change. And people are, until you walk down the street and see a little black kid, nigga run up and shoot him, and he has a badge on, and it's right in front of you, they're not going to believe, right? And again, no more black people. If black people got to die for them to change their views, and they weren't going to change their views to begin with. So that's all I'm saying on that. But
yeah, no, that's great. That's absolutely great. I guess essentially like the last thing, and I'm just trying to think from, somebody who's watching this and like really just, which is ironic because just like what Caleb's saying, like if this person's really bent on like not changing their mind, then I believe that like that's just not going to happen. But I guess the idealist in me does believe that there are people out there who really just can't see, and they really just don't understand. And it takes conversations like this where there is somebody who's speaking from their perspective, like, well, what if you guys just do this? What if this? Or like, yeah, but the rioters, whatever. And seeing people like you guys give these rebuttals for them to be like, dang, like, I guess I didn't really see it that way. I do feel like there's genuine people out there. I do agree with Caleb that there are people who also just, they won't change their mind whatsoever. But then there are also people who like are like, they, because of the places that they grew up, they just don't really understand. And every mind that we touch could be something. So I guess I'm asking like, yeah, what do we do in those situations? Like, what is there to do at all? What's the call of action? Is there a call of action?
Right. So it's just as Caleb said, like, there's been so many counts where someone was in his home and got intruded upon by the police and was shot. Then you have somebody who was compliant and was still shot. Someone who was pulling out a comb. Another person who was pulling out a brush. You know what I mean? Like, they weren't doing anything. They could literally be sitting on the side of the street and still get shot. So it's not, so at that point, it's no longer about, okay, what if you did something differently? You have to start looking at the common denominator. And you have to really start applying, like, okay, why do we keep seeing this issue with the perpetrators, right? Because then what I find now is that people often try to make excuses for the perpetrators, and they try to align themselves or be empathetic towards them. usually with the excuse of, okay, but this person was in fear for their life. Most oftentimes, that person is in a position of power. So how can you be in a position of power and also fear for your life? You know what I mean? Like, if I know that I'm stronger than someone, how am I the one fearing for my life? In most of these cases, they know that, like, okay, sure, I might get injured. There's a possible danger here. There's a possible danger that something might happen. But in most cases, I'm the one who has backup. I'm the one who has the machine that can literally kill somebody and end someone's life. And most likely, they use it. So then, why are you in fear for your life when you're the one when you're the one who's controlling whether or not who dies and who lives? You know what I'm saying? So like, there's not really much of an excuse for the lack of discipline that a lot of perpetrators, because it's not just even police officers, it's more than just police officers at this point. It's more of a lack of discipline towards the gun control. The people who are in those positions of power to be able to control those situations. You have to start looking at those people and saying, okay, what are you doing in those instances, and how could you have changed? Because usually in those instances, it's like, okay, what could this person have done to not get killed? But what could have the person who had the power in that situation have done to not kill?
For sure.
We don't talk about that nearly enough. And that would actually be something that changes a lot of these situations and helps people to actually move forward. But for some reason, more of the onus is always put on us. Why is that?
And where I would, and I know you got to go, so I'm trying to respect your time on that. I once again agree with everything what you're saying. I'm trying to make sure that anybody that's watching, anything they might say, like, it's addressed or it's rehashed. So I'm just thinking, like, okay, then Caleb said it's not our responsibility. But if it's us who are getting killed, if it's them, once again the big brother, little brother thing, it's not the older brother's responsibility or whatever to give up the toy for the younger brother. But the younger brother is irrational. In this case, it's the perpetrators. They're just irrational. So like, the best thing that you can do logically, right, is to be more smart, be better, be more rational, be whatever, in that sense, right? Or is it that you like are there no ways that, because if we can't control what they're doing, the only thing we can do is control what we're doing. So even like the whole like behave thing, it's not necessarily, oh, behave for them because it's our responsibility, but it's more sense this is our survival. You know what I'm saying? And so like, what do we do in those situations? Like, or not even in those situations, because at the end of the day, you can behave, you can do whatever, you still might get shot, and that's sad. That's the reality of the situation. But if like, what do we do? Like, how do we, like, even if it's not our responsibility, does that mean that, like, okay, it's not my job or whatever, but we are ones still getting killed? So what do we do? You know what I'm saying? Because that's right. All we only have ourselves.
I think the issue with the analogy is that it assumes that one party is irrational or is incapable of rationality, and that they are the younger brother, when in fact both brothers are very much equal in age and in rationality. Because when it's time to address other issues, the rationality pops up. You definitely see how they can think very clearly, very logically, and it's not clouded, it's not confused. So it's specifically towards this one issue, in which case I would believe that some people, not all, are feigning irrationality. They're feigning like a confusion because they don't want to see certain things. In which case we have to be able to be discerning of like, okay, do you actually want to understand more? Or are you just saying that so you can escape the conversation? I think that a lot of people might be scared that it's the latter for them. They don't even want to admit, like, okay, maybe I'm just so uncomfortable, and that discomfort is making me confused, so that I can just leave the conversation and exit, so I don't have to be worried about this anymore. Because that's easier. If people are honest with themselves, they don't like discomfort, and so they do whatever they can to exit it. If that is the case, you need to re-examine a lot of different things, because you're now denying and you're denying people of their human dignity because you're uncomfortable, and that's something that needs to be examined. That's something that you have to talk about with other people and with yourself. But as for what Black people can do, I think we've already mentioned it. I think it really comes down to, okay, how can we change the financial powers and dynamics so that we can be able to have more of a stake in these conversations? But then that comes down to resources. That comes down to access. How do we get that? We have to be able to infiltrate and congregate. If we can't do either of those things properly, then we're still going to remain in this situation. And it becomes a cycle. Because how can we be able to get into those places if we don't have allies? If we don't have people who are willing to listen to us? We don't have people that are willing to give us that extra step. Because before we can even congregate, we would have to have the resources and access to be able to do that as well. If we're blocked on both ends, what is there for Black people to be able to do? This is a very complex situation in which it's not going to be easily rectified by one person or even within a certain amount of years unless we get certain access and resources. Point blank.
Thank you. And we're closing out, but David, if you gotta go, like what I was gonna just have is just Jamila. She said that she had one last thing to say, and then I was just gonna close it out. But if you gotta go like right now, that's
like 10 more minutes. We can do 10 minutes.
Okay, cool. So
okay, yeah, I was just gonna kind of approach this from a little bit of a different angle, just a little bit, which would be, I think, kind of the idea of sensationalism. I think that, obviously there are a lot of cases of, innocent, compliant, whatever you want to call it, Black people are getting, murdered. But I think that the ones that are a little bit more gray, so to speak, or whatever, get sensationalized. And so it distracts from the movement as a whole, because it's like, oh, this one situation where, well, this guy, he was on drugs, or maybe he did have a weapon, or maybe he was resistant. It becomes really murky, just generally speaking. And so because it's like, ooh, let's just have everybody fighting, then it's like, okay, but like there's a lot of other cases, or wasn't that murky? But like, and so I don't know. So I think it just gets tricky because like it's easy to use this one thing to be extremely divisive between Black and white people, or however you want to, I guess, separate it. But then also to take away from all of the other cases that go unknown, or like go under the radar, or get swept under the rug, or whatever like that, because of, racism and everything like that. And then lastly, I was just going to say that I think, kind of speaking to what Denzel was saying, like about, it actually kind of sounds like the little brother, big brother thing, but not necessarily, but more so like one day, when or if we have kids, I feel like we'll be a lot and very intentional with being like, okay, this is how, when you interact with the cop, you should act. You don't have the same privileges as white people. And so therefore you have to act accordingly, because I love you and I don't want to, I don't want to have to bury you because of the color of your skin. And so I think it's just about, controlling what you can control, I think, is what it is at the end of the day. And so like, obviously if somehow we had a white kid, we adopted or something, the conversations will be different because the privileges are different. And I think that's kind of the point that Denzel was speaking to a little bit, is not necessarily making white people responsible for the way that they oppress us, but more so being in control of what we can control for the sake of our lives and for the sake of, our loved ones, and for example, our kids one day.
Yeah.
So first, in regards to the sensationalism part, I think Caleb touched on that already in regards to like, okay,
yeah,
he was a drug addict. This person was just a horrible, morally misguided person, and so they deserve to die because of it. Like, there's plenty of white people who we deserve to die, but didn't.
I do wanna clarify. I don't mean like in general on drugs, but maybe in the moment they were like high, and so they were, acting out, so to speak, or being irrational or something like that. I don't mean like, when the story comes out and it's like, oh, he used to smoke weed. I don't mean like that. I mean like in the moment,
Yeah. So a person is
they don't deserve to die.
Right.
Yeah.
It's still the same point at the end of the day. Like, because a person is incoherent, or they may not have made the decisions that you would have made, why does that automatically cause them to be guilty to have to die? Like, why is that a mortal sin? You know what I mean? Like, I think we can all agree that probably not the best position to be in, and I wouldn't even agree it's always the greatest decision to make. But that doesn't mean that because they made a different decision than me, or because they have different circumstances than I do, that they deserve to be shot and killed. For whatever reason that happened in that situation. In regards to children, or like on an individual basis, I think that's very different from a collective, right? So when you're talking to your kids about how to behave with police officers and stuff like that, that is a matter of survival for us, as opposed to respectability politics, where we want to be viewed as a collective.
For sure.
Yes, you understand that it would look better, it would probably fare better for our survival. However, that is still putting the onus on the collective in that situation. And even it's horrible that you would even have to speak to your child on an individual level for the sake of their survival, when the perpetrator is still the common denominator, right? It's still the person who has to. So it's one thing to deal with it on a personal level, which I agree with, but I think what I would press on more is on a policy level. If you have certain policies in place to protect all people, then you don't have to do as much on a personal level, because the policies are there to protect you. People are more in fear of, okay, what's going to happen to the overall government? That's why all of these cases and trials and stuff like that, they're so tense and people are on high edge, because it's more of an authority that you have to answer to. So then if that's the case, and there are policies in place to protect the people and the citizens rather than the police officers or the perpetrators, then you won't have to do as much work on a personal level. Should we do the work on a personal level? Absolutely. That's for our best self-interest. But that doesn't negate the fact that we need to change policies in order to protect the people on a larger level, so we don't have to do as much trying to look like good, perfect citizens just to stay alive.
Yeah, man, that was absolutely beautiful. And I guess for anybody else who's watching, thank you for watching this far, because this is a really serious issue. Like, hopefully a lot of thoughts that y'all were having, that were similar to whatever like I was saying, maybe they've been disassembled. Somebody might have even already been listening now. It's like, I think that one of the best things that personally I feel like you said was that it's not an older brother, younger brother thing. Their rationality comes out in different situations, and they can feign it in certain situations. That was an unlock, that even was for me, because I'm just that type of person personally, who it could sound a little bit arrogant, but I always just think these people don't know better. That's just how it is. So once again, I would just think to that's how I would teach my kids. Like, police, for whatever reason, they just don't know better. These people, they just don't know better. And just like what Jamila was saying, it's not our responsibility for them to be influenced or whatever, but this is for our survival. And that's messed up already, just as it is. But like you said, David, which once again I really just love, is that these are probably like twin brothers who are equally rational, but one is just for whatever reason. Maybe it's not even that they're irrational. It's just that it's not that they're irrational. It's not that they're ignorant. They're just, I don't even know what they are. Like that's just the thing. And that's why we just have to survive. So it's almost to an extent where like I'm still standing by, like, and you just summed it up, like, got to teach your kids this stuff. But yes, we do have to rebel. We still have to rebel. And I love what Caleb also said. Like, there's enough situations. I seen a body cam video. There's so many of these where somebody was literally just, they were just taking out the trash, and the police came and they started like interrogating him, and he's like, "Well, no, it wasn't me," or whatever. They start like, beating him up or whatever, and his wife was in the shower upstairs. She had to run downstairs from the shower. She was white. His white wife was in the shower, like she ran downstairs, like trying, like, because they were trying to like arrest him, and like they were just, I don't even remember the details, but it was just something gruesome that was just going on, and I'm like, yeah, he was behaving, sure, but that was one of them situations actually where I was happy because they went to TV, they sued them people, they sued them, they took it on the TV and everything. And my mom had said to me, I know how my mom be like. And I was just watching, I was like clapping. I was like, this is what I want to see. Like, because these police officers just look stupid. And it's like, we have enough of these situations, where hopefully we can just keep on making cases like, so yeah, keep on recording what's going on. Keep on like, personally, I say keep on trying to make them look dumb. Like, so that like when they try to like blame you, they don't have anything. They don't have no grounds. They don't have no grounds. So that way, and there are, like Caleb said, there are going to be people who are just for whatever reason just stuck in whatever they're thinking. That's fine. We're not trying to really influence them. This is just more, it's more of a survival thing, which is what I probably should have made more clear at the beginning. It's more of a survival thing than a convincing thing. And yeah, I think that's about everything. So before we close out, does anybody have any last whatevers?
I appreciate you for playing devil's advocate, and so that we can have our counter arguments. And what's up? I'm sorry, the dog was being weird. Yeah, I appreciate you for playing devil's advocate. I think the only other thing I will say is that with the big brother analogy, I would almost argue that the situation that we're in is like the big brother acting irrationally and you telling the little brother to behave.
Wow.
Just because of the position that we've been put in, where we've been oppressed for so long. We're not necessarily in positions of authority. We're not really in a position to even have the power to make the changes necessary, but we're still the ones that have to change our behavior and change the way we live our lives to, survive. And so I don't know. That's the only thing I would say, but I think everyone hit it spot on. I think at the end of the day, it's not a black and white argument. That's not even that wasn't even in terms of race, but it's just not a black and white argument. It's more of just.
You're a rapper, so
the analogies just come to me, though. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of gray area, and there's definitely a lot of work to do that we can do, and there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in order for us to start seeing significant change on all accounts.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. And you're good, David?
I talk too much.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for watching. Really appreciate it. And leave your comments, questions, concerns, thoughts. Follow Caleb and David. David's name on Instagram is Individual, as y'all can see over there, and on Twitter. I think it's the same thing on Twitter right now, right? Okay, cool. And Caleb's is Dr. New York on Twitter and on Instagram, I believe.
I think I'm still Mr. New York on Instagram.
Okay, you got to change that. Yeah. Caleb and I have a video coming out soon too, because now he's a doctor, and so we got to follow up on that INFP video. It's been in the making, but yeah, that's going to be coming out soon too. But yeah, just make sure y'all go follow them. Follow Jamila, as you already know. Stuff's going to be in the bio. Leave questions, comments, concerns, and done. Hey, I just wanted to briefly thank you for taking the time to watch this video, whether it was on regular speed or 2x speed, whatever it was. Just thank you for consuming the content. And around me, you should be able to see a few little buttons and logos for other recommended videos, because, you know, I make good content, new ones, but then I also have some really good old content too that you should probably check out. But make sure that if you really like this video, feel free to subscribe, to share. It really helps this humble channel to expand and reach more people and ultimately help more people. So once again, thanks for watching, and hope you have a great rest of your day.